All right. It says we're going. Let's see. Dead air. I'm very sorry if anyone's listening to this. Okay. It claims that we're live. All right.
So it says.
Yeah, so it says. If not, we'll just have a fun conversation anyway. It's their loss if they miss it. So this is that dumb show called PODLOMATIC that I kind of love that name. Episode 9. Today we have well, I guess I could ask you. Well, first I'll introduce you. I'm so dumb. All right, Leanore, who's you. Feel free to introduce yourself. This is terrible. I'm the worst. Go ahead.
I'm probably worse at introducing myself than anybody else on the planet.
Well, we're
It's
both
like
gonna
awkward
stumble
sea
through.
turtle.
We're gonna have the best time, the best show.
The most socially awkward show known to man.
That's what we're famous for here on this channel.
Perfect.
I'll just stutter through the whole thing. But please, do you use your full name publicly?
Not often, not for a preference reason. Really, it's just not as catchy. It's more marketable just to have the one name thing. It sounds cool.
So Leanore, like Cher.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
Okay. Lost Leanore on Twitter, if anyone's wondering. I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, you know who she is. I was going to ask, I guess one of the first questions is, how did you get plugged in with everybody? Because I got started with everyone, I guess, 6 or 7 months ago-ish.
I honestly don't particularly remember an exact date. It was sort of one of those things where I'm constantly just running my mouth on the internet, and eventually people started responding in ways that weren't always aggressive or negative.
Okay.
And it went from there. I don't know. I can't. I'm terrible with remembering stuff like that. I could like go through my Twitter, but it's probably been. I've known some of these folks for well over a year now, at least.
Okay.
Because I knew some of them before there was any sort of kerfuffle to be had anywhere, and I was like the last to find stuff out. So I'm like, wait, what?
That's actually an interesting question. Is
drama? I had no idea.
As far as the drama goes, you had been talking to people before that, and then you were surprised to. Well, I guess
and it's like I don't really ask people personal questions, so it was interesting to find out how many people that I got along with just fine that absolutely hated each other, and then some of them were like, yeah, some of them did the whole I don't like that you like these people, or I would tell them you're being a little dramatic, and that was the end of a couple of awkward acquaintances. But you know,
yeah, I was blindsided by that too. But I mean, I compare it to like the lunch tables in high school. Like, I guess some people just don't like to have lunch together, even though you're all kind of in the same room at the same.
Yeah. Like, fun fact, I tested out of high school. I could not stand that kind of nonsense there, to the point where like my literal social anxiety was so aggravated. I made it halfway through freshman year, halfway through sophomore year, and just got a doctor's note to test out because I literally could not anymore.
Huh.
It was too much. So like, it's interesting to have the realization that never goes away. That mentality is always deeply embedded in like the groupthink weirdness, and it's literally impossible to avoid on a grand scale. It's kind of disheartening, but you kind of learn to cope because at least as an adult, you're not forced into a building with a bunch of these people at the same time every day.
That's really. I had a very similar situation in my high school years. Like, I forced myself to go, but I had to do an extension for my absentee days. I got a doctor's note basically saying that like I could be absent any number of days, because later I realized I was having also social anxiety, something like it, where I just didn't want to go into that building anymore. And I would spend all my time, I would cut class, I would just sit in this, we called them cubbies, like next to these windows, and I would just read all day.
It got to the point where just being around these dramatic human beings freaking out about stuff that I personally didn't think mattered was so stressful. It was like the building and the air around it was just traumatic to be around. I couldn't physically stand it anymore.
So sophomore year, you said you just noped out.
Noped out. I found all possible avenues to get all of the fancy paperwork that says, look, I'm not an idiot. I just couldn't stand high school kids. Like,
Okay. Yeah, when I was in high school too, I knew a bunch of kids who were homeschooled and they had GEDs or they
yep.
ended up with them. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, you can do that?
Yes. It's like, I feel like if more people knew this.
Man, if I had known about it, I would have pursued it more aggressively than I did. By the time I knew about it, I was already a junior or senior. So it's like, I may as well just finish this clown show.
Because I loved the learning part and I loved like the class setting in theory, but it was like human beings are incapable of just sitting still and focusing on one thing at a time. I guess I'm even guilty of that, but it's it's stressful to be like, I just want to hear what the guy in the front of the room that's getting paid to talk to me is saying. Can you please shut up?
So they're
Which doesn't make
interesting.
you super popular, and trying to balance having friends and not having them hate you because you actually want to pay attention in class is kind of troublesome.
So you would call it out.
Yeah, okay, it would get frustrating, especially if it was a topic I found interesting. If it was a topic I hated or already knew about, I honestly didn't care. But I was kind of, I guess, self-centered that way. I only really gave a shit about my own education.
Hmm.
The rest of you be damned.
I have seen a sort of similar, and I guess yeah, it's been a huge turnoff for me if I see that kind of behavior around me. Let's say in the professional sphere, high school drama kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just I don't want anything to do with it, and man, it's like should I just stop drawing comics altogether because I keep running into. I don't know, but I guess it's just part of the human condition. I just say it's an introvert thing versus an
I
extrovert.
And the best way I've learned that so far, if I just don't even feed the negative stuff or the stuff that I don't want to signal boost. And I've caught myself just jumping, like not being able to hold my tongue and calling some stuff out that's just absolutely ridiculous. But even that's not helpful because it's still drawing attention to something that shouldn't even be being paid attention to. Like, I try to be annoyingly positive,
Uh,
yet delightfully cynical all at the same time. That's kind of my shtick.
uh, I say cautious. Well, also there's in that cheesy way, Greek people are like famous for something called stoicism. We're talking thousands of years ago, so who cares now? But like, it's this whole I don't know. Like, I get emotionally like excited very easily. So if someone around me is outbursting like really happy, I'll absorb that and I'll be
Yes.
happy. Or if someone next to me is really sad, I'll become sad. And it's better for me to just kind of tune out everybody and wear headphones and not be a part of whatever. I don't know.
No, that totally makes sense. I can absolutely relate to that. It's a lot easier for you to be content or happy if the people around you are content and happy. So,
Mhm.
and it same the opposite. And I found that humans oddly react stronger to negativity, whether it's just the person next to you is upset, so that makes it hard to be, or that they're angry, so then you're a little uncomfortable, or you're angry. The same thing kind of goes for having a positive reaction to negativity, like the train wreck situation, where like human beings can't not look away at this horrible thing. It's a bad thing. We're not
Right.
supposed to like it, but we're fixated with it. And that whole thing has turned into this horrible epidemic of like outrage addiction where people are always mad or they're always trying to make people mad because that's the marketable thing. Negativity is responded to so much more quickly.
Uh-huh. You
It's sad.
it's interesting that word marketing that really hits it on the head, doesn't it?
Yes.
And when all marketing seems to be based around, let's say, drama, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to try to like, for instance, like one of the reasons why I was curious to talk to you is about sort of what kind of books, let's say people who aren't interested in social drama, who just want to read a good book, um, how and if it's even possible for those books to stand out in let's say a sea of drama when it's almost like, let's say I'm starting fights with somebody and somebody wants to read, I say, oh, by the way, I have a book for sale. It's almost like the people that I'm asking to support me are just supporting me because I'm fighting, not because they want to read my book.
That is always, and that's one of the things that I thought about at one point, and I made the conscious decision that if I did call somebody out or say something stupid on the internet. It was going to either be something stupid ironically or funny, or it's going to be somebody so far detached and it's like, or in a way that it doesn't really keep going at. I like try as hard as I can not to pick fights or put myself in the middle of an argument I have nothing to do with, because 9 times out of 10, the drama you see scrolling past, you're not involved in. And none of the people in the thread are technically involved in it either. They just saw something that they witnessed, quote unquote, happen that makes them feel like they can weigh in on something else that happened to so-and-so. And the reality is none of it is, there's usually 2 people involved, and chances are those 2 people stopped caring 40 comments ago in the thread. And the only reason it's still getting drug up is because everybody else is feeding the fire and trying to get themselves involved. And by the time it hits the drama channels on YouTube, it's gotten so far detached from where it started that nobody's quite sure what they're mad about anymore, but everybody's still pissed off. Well, and it's all within the big grand scale arguments where everybody's still mad about the one thing, but now we're all mad about little things inside that. And that's just exhausting.
So I guess the option for somebody who wants to do their own thing is just to back away and focus on their own work.
Yeah, I mean, and I still do try to engage and like network and build cordial relationships, because none of these people have done anything to me personally at all. And none of them have done anything that I honestly can confirm is so terrible that I should hate them for it just on principle. Like, that just seems dramatic. So I have no problems interacting with all of these people. Like, I see them get into fights and I'm like, that's wow. And I can't, it's like there's no winning side to any of it. So why comment? Why get involved? And the only thing I can hope for is that the stuff I'm putting out there appeals to enough people that they don't try to, like, you're going to have people that try to drag you into arguments and drag you into fights. And I try to establish the fact that I'm a free thinker. I will always make my own decisions based on my own observations. And unless I see a reason to be a dick to somebody based on my own personal experience, I'm just not going to do it.
I see.
And I try not to piss people off with that. There's very few people that seem to actually have a problem with that. Most people are completely fine with me being me. I haven't had anybody take it personally yet. I'm sure it'll happen when more people start paying attention or giving a crap. But at the moment, I'm so irrelevant that I haven't had to deal with a lot of anything too bad. But it does make it unfair, because the people who aren't trying to get attention by picking fights for funsies have to produce a product that much better in order for anybody to give a shit. You know what I mean? Because you can't put anything subpar out there. Your shit's got to be on point. Otherwise, that'll be the argument you get pulled into, because somebody will make unnecessary comments. And you're either going to end up defending your work or taking the criticism. And you're still stuck in a situation where you have to work that much harder just to get the customers, just to build the fan base. Because nobody's paying attention if nobody's mad. Even if they're not mad, it's like the train wreck thing. Let's all look at the train wreck, and that's what we want to pay attention to. That's where we'll spend our money.
I sort of see that strategy as a good short-term, a very good short-term boost. But long-term, I don't know if, I mean, I'm just talking out my butt right now, but I don't know if that kind of reputation long-term is going to help. But I'm thinking of someone like Keemstar, who is just... It depends.
I mean... Yeah, and those are, it's odd when it's somebody who's so synonymous with something that like generally toxic behavior, but he's not actually, when you look at him, he's probably not a terrible guy. He's just constantly is from what I don't really watch his stuff, but from what I can tell, it's when negative stuff's going on or bad stuff's going on or people are upset with somebody else that he's really in there making those views, and that's cool. I mean, that's his thing, but I've also noticed that people who have a comedic spin on it and aren't always being like seriously negative, like downright evil about it, and kind of have a bit of humor to it, like I guess the typical shit poster, like those are people who you'll see outrage in their comments, but it's usually because the person didn't get the joke, and those people get away with it. Like they're getting into Twitter fights or drama is drawing attention to them, but they're not actually saying anything super offensive or being cancelable or anything like that, because it's all clearly a joke when you look at it. Those people have found the master algorithm. because they're managing to skirt the line of pissing off just enough people who weren't paying attention to get the people who have a sense of humor to see it in their feed.
Mhm. Unfortunately, though, they do seem to take up a lot of the real estate. Whereas, let's say people who would rather avoid conflict would rather focus on their work. And I am circling back around to the actual work itself. But the reason I
Yeah.
bring this up is I think one of the biggest handicaps for someone who's, let's say, quieter, art focused, work focused, is getting noticed in this sea of people who are just, it's like, sometimes it's called a personality cult. Not a cult in like a bad way, but like there's a lot of charismatic people out there who will
Yeah.
really draw attention to themselves. Whereas who's going to notice the quiet person in the corner drawing?
Very true. Although I will say, and I might be a little bit biased, that I have found people who are typically quiet in the corner, once you do get them talking, are more charismatic than the a-holes people are paying attention to. They're at least as intelligent, and they can banter. Like you're talking, you've got conversational skills. I'd like to think that other than the stuttering and the ums and the lack of coherent conversation, I'm all right.
We're both fine. I think what it is people. I keep using the I word, introvert, but what it is we tend to thrive in personal, small conversations, like one-on-one. Whereas the few times I've been on the bigger streams with the big boys, let's say, I did not say a single word within like a 2-hour span, because I don't want to talk over people. B, I just can't find an in. I don't want to interrupt. But and also I don't like small talk either. But at the same time, how do you get to really know someone unless you're having a one-on-one or maybe two-on-one conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, I figure this is, at least it's for my type of personality, and I sense a certain affinity with certain people. I could just tell, like, oh, they're like me. I can't. It's a certain. I can't put my finger on it, but what I'm trying to say is, I guess a format like this, a conversation like this, is beneficial as opposed to the round table. Let's just talk as loud as we can over each other about whatever.
True. And more tangents seem to get thrown around and tossed back and forth like hot potatoes the more people there are.
Yeah. And if it's that hard for a group of 3 or 4 people to even have one thread of a conversation, I doubt a whole lunch table discussion.
Yes.
I don't know. But more importantly, rounding back to the art thing, I was curious to ask about well, you said about tying back to the high school thing about leaving high school and that sort of thing. Were you drawing back then? Did you consider art as sort of a form of therapy, of coping,
I first started using art as therapy like in elementary school, actually. I was really young when I first started noticing that it was the best way for me to express myself without getting directly confronted with my own feelings, I guess. Like they weren't right there in front of, like, I don't know, I could detach it, be like, this is a thing I drew, not this is a thing that I felt. Okay. I guess that was how I looked at it as a kid. And so I was always in the art classes. I was one of the like second graders that had their art up in the museum and was all like proud of it, but also didn't tell anybody. So my family was kind of mad about that because I didn't want to make a big deal about it. I very vividly remember the first time that happened, my art teacher sent a letter home and I didn't take the first letter. Like I didn't give it to my parents because I didn't think it was that. I was proud of it, but I didn't want it to be a big deal. I was embarrassed, I guess. And I don't even remember what it was that I painted. I think it was like a swimming pool or something. Mm-hmm. And it was the weirdest sensation to be proud of something, but also not want anybody to pay attention to it because I didn't want them to not like it as much as I guess the person who put it up in the little museum display or whatever.
I still have feelings like that with, like, say, my comics. Recently, one of my nephews saw one of my books, and I was really embarrassed. I didn't want him to read it.
It's interesting because it's like, I made this thing, and I'm really proud of it, but don't look at it.
Do you get that feeling of like, no, this is a piece of me. Don't look at me.
Yes, it's like I I totally relate to that. That's one of the hardest things about being somebody who has any kind of emotional connection to anything they create visually, because at some point somebody else is going to look at it or read it if it's literature or songs or something like that.
Uh-huh.
It's going to happen at some point. It's unavoidable, and when that happens, you've got to deal with it. And it's so bizarre because once somebody's looked at it, they can't unlook at it, and it's very weird sensation, especially if you're doing it on purpose. Like if your end goal is to make something for somebody to look at, you're kind of consciously aware of that the whole time you're working on it.
Do you find that it's easier to show to strangers because, like, my theory would be that you're showing them a piece of yourself that you're carefully constructing, like a mask. Here is this mask of me that I want you to see.
Um, yes and no. That
Okay.
was more true when I was younger and I was first getting on the internet, when the internet was new and still squeaked at you when you turned it on.
Mhm.
Um, because I was very worried about, and this is funny because when I was younger and the internet was new, I was petrified because my father, being the nerd that he was, beat it into my head that anytime you said something online or interacted with somebody, you better make sure that it's nothing that's, don't say anything illegal or don't do anything wrong because it's there forever.
Yeah.
So that was always, so I don't have like everything I've tweeted in my entire online career, I was prepared for somebody to throw in my face later.
Hmm.
One of those situations when I was younger. So I was constantly very aware of the art that I was scanning or posting or taking pictures of, or the pictures all had to be very particularly curated for a very long time. That was entirely necessary for me to even exist online, because that was the safe space for me where I didn't have to worry about people seeing me stutter or get, overwhelmed by a conversation or anything like that. Like I could keep that part of me away from it.
Mhm.
The vulnerable part could just kind of chill and be cool in the dark and not be stressed out for a while. And as I got older, that started to feel weird. Like the fakeness of it began to bother me. And it was somewhere around the time that I got fed up with high school that I was like, I can't do this anymore, and started to try to think about who I really wanted to be as a person and whether I really gave a shit what the general public thought in general. And there's still some things that I'm kind of like insecure about, that are like personal things that I don't run around on the internet going, look at this. But as far as it comes to like the way I look, or the fact that I'm terribly awkward, or the fact that I swear like a sailor, these
Mhm.
are all things that I've come to terms with. I'm not trying to pretend these aren't part of me anymore. The fact that I'm occasionally sarcastic or make jokes at really inappropriate times, like these are things that I'm aware of, and I'm okay with it, and I don't care if people know about it.
Mhm.
And so my art has gotten it, but it is easier to show my art to strangers almost because it's vulnerable. And because I put a lot into it, because I'm less upset when a stranger says this sucks, or if a stranger isn't super excited about something, it doesn't bother me. But if somebody I'm close to or somebody I really care about doesn't react to something the way you want them to, it can kind of hurt. So it's
Uh-huh.
definitely easier to like say, look at this, to a complete stranger. Because if they're like, okay, you're like, fine, fuck you. And you go to the next one, look at this. It's
Oh, I
a
see. It's
little
sort
bit
of like if
easier.
your spouse doesn't like your favorite band.
Kind of, only if you were in your favorite band or wrote all the music for your favorite band and they
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of a thing.
Because
Yes,
this
it's
is so
like,
important to me. I
yes,
want
like
it to be. Yeah,
it's
okay.
more devastating if somebody that you care about isn't super excited about the thing that you did. But if
Mhm.
somebody that's just random on the internet doesn't suck. I mean, it sucks because it's that one less person that's likely to buy the book it's going to be in. But it
Yeah,
doesn't suck in that it doesn't hurt my feelings.
I see. Well, there's a lot of different. There's so many different types of artists, I suppose. I don't even use the word artist to describe myself. It depends on who you're talking to. For me, I say illustrator because I don't really often. The kind of things that I draw aren't me expressing myself in any way. I want to draw this thing and it's fun. So here's this thing.
Well, wouldn't you say that your avatar right there is expressing something? I mean,
I
I would beg to differ. You put expressions on these characters, and if the character is you and you're
yeah.
putting an expression on it, you're being pretty directly expressive.
There
Like there's
are
not even any nuance. It's like, this is my face, this is how I feel.
that does make sense. Yeah. I It depends on the job. Once you start, and I'm just saying this generally, once a person starts doing it for a living, I guess, it's almost like now I have to find another way to express myself, because now the thing that I used to do to express myself is the thing that I try to do to earn a living. So there's over here in this corner, for instance, I have this comic strip that I do, and that's my personal thing. Like, I don't care if that makes money, I'm still going to make it. And over here is all the other stuff I do just to make money. So all the stuff I do to make money, I kind of, it's pretty pictures, it's fun, people can see it, but the stuff that would really hurt me if people criticized it the wrong way would be like this little comic strip, because it's so raw and real from my heart, let's say. All the other stuff, I don't know, all the other stuff is sort of distant, detached. But that's just to say that's my personal style. It sounds like your art is very much a part of you.
It's so it's very interesting because sometimes I won't actually be able to articulate why something is very personal, because sometimes it will be genuinely hard for me to just straight up say, this is why this is important. But there's almost always a reason why I did something. Like, I felt a thing and this was how I expressed it. And unless it was a commission, of course, like if somebody said, I want you to draw this thing, then obviously that's the thing that I draw.
Yeah.
And sometimes my mood when I work on a commission will affect the way my style is, because I don't really have a very typical style. There isn't always exact features that all my art shares. Everything is kind of almost a one-off, even if it's the same character twice, which is something I'm working on very, very hard, because if I plan on doing a sequential comic at any point in time, the character should probably look the same on 2 pages.
Yeah.
And that's not, I mean, I'm sure it's not as bad as I think it is. I'm pretty particular. My downfall is my art school training tried to teach me how to be a fine art Xerox machine, which isn't very creative.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I've struggled with. My creative side that always just played with finger paints until it looked pretty, and I messed up and went to art school and paid too much attention, and they forced me to try to make everything look photorealistic, which isn't super marketable. Like, it'll get the retweets or the Instagram likes, but it's, if somebody wanted super photorealistic all the time, they would just take pictures.
Yeah, I often say that there's almost no point in drawing something too realistic, because there's no life. I always say art as a medium, as in a bridge between two people, is what am I trying to say? I want to look at the world through someone else's eyes.
Yes.
Show me how you see this.
And that's not necessarily to say that photography can't be an art form, but when I think of an artistic photographer, they don't just take a picture and say, here's my picture. They take a picture after selectively thinking about lighting, time of day, the colors in the background. Like, I've watched a photographer spend 45 minutes setting up like one shot, and they took 12 pictures of the same thing just to make sure they got that perfect angle. And then they still spent 3 weeks editing the color layers and all kinds of things about this picture. So by the time it was done, it was genuinely art at that point. It wasn't just click, there it is. And that's kind of the new, like, I don't have the patience for that. I've done photo editing. That was when I was doing art exclusively to try to make a living. I was like desperate for anything creative to do for work, and that genuinely killed my love for art for like a hot minute. And that's when I had to start doing, that's why I have a day job at the moment, because I would rather do, like, I do commissions, but typically the people who commission me are people I like, and they have really exciting projects, and they're things that I enjoy working on now. They're not Joe Schmo who needs a flyer for his event, or this new startup business that needs a logo. And I did the boring typeface graphic design logo stuff. I did a lot of it because I was good at it for no reason, literally no reason other than I played with Photoshop as a kid. That's the only reason. But I saw that as being the thing people were trying to actually pay money for. So that's what I did. And I tried as hard as I could to make it creative too. Like, I was always like, do you want me to draw you a custom illustration for your logo? And like, I would try to upsell it too, but sometimes I would undersell it just to give myself an excuse to draw something fun.
Yeah.
And that, it got really hard, and it wasn't making as much money as it should have been at the time. I'm terrible at marketing myself, like absolutely terrible. I am terrified to try to force somebody to like a thing, but that's not, sometimes that's not the point. You just got to have them look at it. In order to get somebody to look at it on the internet, you have to act like they already like it.
Well, it is an additional challenge for, let's say, we could use the word shy, maybe, I don't know. we spend a lot of time improving ourselves, working on ourselves. But when it comes to stuff like networking, we're severely at a disadvantage, I would
It's
say.
terrible, because
But
I
all,
don't know how to start the conversation. Like, it's so awkward. I'll sit there with the chat window open or the comment box up, and I'm just like, okay, what now?
yeah, there's even when I went to art school for a year and like a month, and then I dropped out. But the first few days that I went, I was a commuter. And I guess all of the people who lived on campus already knew each other because they had mixers or something the night before. So when I got there, they all seemed to have formed groups already. So I didn't talk to anyone for months. And I was like, isn't the whole point of being in art school to network, not and also to get better? But I can do that on my own time. And I was like,
Yeah.
shoot, this is high school all over again. I'm in art school, supposedly around my own people, but I can't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And then I found a couple of people like me who were just wallflowers, and then I kind of chit chatted with them. But if only I had been just a little more braver, I think, and just walked up to the groups and be like, "Hey, you should say." I don't know what I would say to these people. The same. I would have the same crippling problem I have now, I guess. But
I've
like,
always, people have, there was a brief period of time where people in high school thought I was just a raging bitch because I didn't walk up to people. But if you came up to me, I would talk to you. I wouldn't be rude. But I guess some people thought that I thought I was too good to approach somebody. You had to approach me. And I'm like, that wasn't it at all. I just didn't want to get it. Half of it was I didn't want to get up because for a while in school, not necessarily high school, but like when I was younger, I was kind of chubby. So moving around wasn't great. I was like, I'll sit over here. Thanks. I wasn't really in shape, wasn't really athletic, didn't like moving too much.
I say,
Um, Not like terribly or anything like that. But it was one of those things where half of it was I was just lazy. I didn't want to walk around and do the legwork to meet and talk to people. And the other half was if I walk up to you and you reject me, then I look stupid or then I've put effort in there for nothing. But if somebody walks up to me, then they've put in the effort and it's fine.
I see. So a lot of that I think is maybe I guess there's two layers to it. A is maybe subconsciously we're sending just through body language signals of leave me alone. And I know that I've been told many times like I have a resting bitch face. So like or the male equivalent of that.
I think
And
I consciously avoid that. I'm usually making like a ridiculous face. If I'm in a good mood, my face is not doing normal things.
okay.
I'm trying to make Lee laugh or something, and we're making faces at dogs on the street. I do that a lot. Or getting excited about a squirrel, like random stuff. Like I've gotten to the point where I don't really care if my face is doing something ridiculous. So I think that's my only saving grace is that I will just be ridiculous for the sake of it, even if it's just to make myself laugh. And that typically makes me seem less bitchy these days.
That's good.
I've
I'm still
tried to
trying to
like,
train myself. I'm sure it's going to be a lifetime struggle for me. The other side of it, I notice is, let's say there's a group of people and we want to sort of get to know even other artists or creators. I can't presume that I have anything worthwhile to say other than, hi, I want to get to know you guys. I have nothing else to say. Bye. I can't walk up to people and just be like, hi, you should know my name. Bye.
it's the perpetual. Yeah, I totally get that because you perpetually feel like the toddler that just runs up and tugs on the pant leg and then goes hi and runs away.
Yeah.
It's like I just wanted you to know I exist. I'm gone now. Bye bye. And I've done that a couple of times and it's really weird and I always feel super awkward about it. But then if I bring it up later, like if the same person talks to me again and we begin talking regularly, I won't bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're like, do you remember when? And I'm like, yeah. Or something like that. And they'll ask me why. And I'll be like, because I totally didn't know what else to say. I kind of just panicked, stopped talking.
Yeah.
And they'll usually say like, well, why? There was nothing wrong with it. Or they'll try to reassure me and stuff like that. So typically it's fine. But for if they don't respond, I am mortified. Because I'm like, great, they think I'm a nutcase. Or they have made some sort of ridiculous, and it's not that it necessarily affects me on an emotional level, but I'm like, that sucks. That's one more person that I can't talk to about, or communicate with. Or if it's somebody who's even like, I want to support their work or I really like their art, I don't really give a shit if they promote my stuff.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, great, this person who does this that I think is super talented thinks I'm a freaking moron now. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Like it's not necessarily, it doesn't affect my daily life, but it's always going to be in the back of my head. Like, well, what if I get to a point where I get a chance to work with them on a project and the whole time they're thinking, well, that's the weird girl that just sent me the 2-letter direct message and then never followed up.
I see. So maybe it's really the problem is not that we are able to talk to people. It's the icebreakers that's the problem.
Yeah, I can't get a conversation started to save my life without like awkwardly stumbling over small talk, awkward euphemisms, and all kinds of stuff you probably shouldn't say to people. But that's the only way I know how to get a conversation started, is to make them laugh by being outrageous, or just, yeah. But electric shock is probably not the greatest way to go with that. And that's my constant concern, is because I have turned the filter off. That's why I don't often do a lot of live streams, because I'm like, I'm going to say something really bad. And I'm going to get somebody else's channel shut down. Like, I don't actually think it'll happen, but it's a back of my head constant concern. Like, what can you, and you never know what you can and can't say on the internet anymore. It's constantly changing. So I'm trying to be aware of that, not because I care to the point. I mean, if you're trying to market anything online, you kind of have to be aware of it and try not to get all of your accounts shut down by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time.
My goodness, I couldn't imagine what you were alluding to, but there's a lot of, well, I'm sure there's some things you could say that are spicy, let's say. But
yeah, and that's typically where I'm at. I mean, spicy. That's
I say spicy.
Yeah, that's, I guess, a good way to describe it. I try to, I don't know, I guess being spunky and sarcastic. Humor is my coping mechanism now. Rather than being like super just withdrawn, I just try to be funny and cry behind the laughing mask.
I understand. Well, I think also part of that is authenticity. I personally don't like being fake or having feelings like I have to project fakeness, let's say. So if I'm in a room with a bunch of people and I have to pretend that I'm going to be happy, let's say, I would rather just let them see that I'm not happy. It would bother me. It would almost feel as if, I don't know, like I'm lying to them.
Well, my thing is, I like laughing and I like making people laugh, even if I'm in a bad mood. So you could just tell by my humor. If I'm in a bad mood, if I'm in a shitty mood, if I'm mad, then my jokes are going to reflect that. My sense of humor is going to reflect that. It's going to be a little darker, more cynical humor, a little edgier. But if I'm in a good mood, then my humor is going to be like fluffy, lighthearted kind of stuff. Those are going to be the jokes I'm making. So it did. I mean, I don't try to be disingenuous with people, but I also don't want to make them uncomfortable, because that's not good for anybody. And I've personally found that people get really uncomfortable when you just sit and stare at them for long periods of time.
That's why I keep getting arrested.
Like, or even if you're just staring down or you're not making eye contact, like, it makes people uncomfortable, especially if they're in a situation where they have to sit next to you, or you're in a social situation. And that makes me feel bad. And I guess it's just me being selfish. I don't want to fucking feel bad. So I'm going to make you laugh to appease my own personal feelings. And if it makes your day better, then great, everybody wins.
On that note, actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I've noticed you posted a lot of videos of you singing. Is that one of your hobbies?
It is. I did it in school, like choir briefly. My anxiety would not allow me to do the stand in front of everybody in the auditorium and step away from the crowd solos. But there was actually a period of time in middle school where the choir director let me turn around and face the back of the shell to sing the solo, so I couldn't see the audience. So it's one of those things that I've kind of been able to do, but it freaks me out to do it, because I don't think it's good. I guess I have an odd, like, I don't hear myself the way I sound when I record myself and play it back. That's not how I sound in real time to myself at all. I don't know who that person is.
Yeah, well, isn't that what happens to most people, though? Like, our voices don't sound the same. Like, if I listen to this video back, I'm like, wow, my voice really sounds like that. That's weird.
It freaks me out, though. I think that's a problem. That's one of the reasons why singing's been one of those things that I could do. And several people have said, like, that's a talent, that's a skill. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But it freaking stresses me out to do sometimes, because then I have to at some point hear myself. And because it's not what I think I sound like, it wigs me out. Like making videos for YouTube, I have to edit it and I have to kind of like close my eyes and not look at it while I'm listening to it and editing out like any weird noises and stuff like that and pretend I'm editing somebody else's stuff. Like that's how I have to get around it. And I have absolutely no idea why. It's not even something that I thought affected my life enough to bring up in therapy. It's just like my own voice freaks me the hell out.
It's funny because when I listen to the videos, you sound so confident. But
I think I block myself unless I'm hearing it back. Like I don't have audio monitors on. When I'm like I can't hear myself with my headphones on. I can hear you through the headphones, and I'm sure you can hear me, but I can't hear myself at all, and I won't until I play it back.
Okay.
It's awkward.
Well, the reason I bring it up, though, is because I can also confirm what the other people are saying, is that you do have an immense talent for it. I was even going to ask about sort of styles of singing. If you have experience with it in the past, I'm curious to hear about the different genres you like. But I was sort of, the ones that I was listening to, I'm getting like a bluesy jazz kind of femme fatale even kind of.
Yeah, I'm big into, in fact, when I was really young, I was really into Xena Warrior Princess, and one of the reasons that I was absolutely fangirling over Lucy Lawless is because I found out that she did lounge singing before she broke into acting.
I see.
And I've always loved the like chick in front of the piano holding the microphone vibe, or even like the old school male crooners. Like loved that jazzy, loungy vibe. Was always something that I really thought was super classy. Had like just the edge of sex appeal that it needed to, but still classy. Like it wasn't vulgar in any way. Even when they were being suggestive, it was always something that wasn't, I don't know, looked down upon the way that a lot, like some of, I don't know, it's weird. Maybe it's my way of being like oddly wholesome, but still wanting to. I liked the fact that these women were embracing their sexuality, but they weren't taking their clothes off or they weren't dancing around or gyrating very erotically, but they were still oozing sex appeal. And the men did the same thing. They would just stand there and would make people weak in the knees just with their pure singing vibe. And it wasn't even so much the tone of their voice, like how talented they were or how good at holding the note they were. It was just the charisma of the whole situation. Mm-hmm. That was something I've always admired, like loved that.
Have you ever performed live at a sort of thing like that, or?
A couple of times. I tried to join like weird cover bands growing up in high school and shit, but like nobody ever took it seriously. They would rather just like sit around and smoke pot and look at the instruments. And that was frustrating. I'm like, so I'm the only one that actually wanted to do the thing. But there was a period of time where my aunt was married to a guy that owned a restaurant that had an open mic night. And I did that a couple of times solo. I kind of know how to play the guitar. And I more recently learned how to play the ukulele. That's one of those things I never got taught to do. I just sort of learned it by ear and from the internet. So I'm not super great, but enough to kind of accompany myself instead of having to get somebody else involved.
Yeah.
So I did that a couple of times, but it freaked me out. I tried to audition for American Idol once, and that was the most horrifying experience of my life. Yeah, I had a panic attack while I was singing, and I kept singing. And then when they were like, "You didn't make it," I was not remotely shocked, but I still just like walked out of there completely mortified. And when I got outside, 3 other people who were in my high school choir were standing outside bawling, and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't feel so bad." Like,
yeah,
it was very traumatic. But they came to Austin when I was in high school, and I remember like even trying to. Like I thought about my look and everything. I had like the underside of my hair was shaved and dyed a different color than the top part. I was like, if I look, because I'd seen the show, it's like if I look a little ridiculous, that might get me through to the judges. Because there's like 1,000 people that have to see the like producers before you ever get filmed or anything. And there's like a ratio you can see where they're like, these people get through because they look ridiculous, and these 3 people get through because they actually have talent.
Or they have something that makes them funny or something.
Yeah, it's like there's a gimmick. You have to have a gimmick. You can't just be talented. You have to have a really dramatic sob story, and be comfortable talking about it and crying about it in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. Like if you're not comfortable being a sob story, or you don't wear a weird, awkward outfit that probably shouldn't be on TV, because I saw a couple of those ladies get passes, and I'm like, how is that not going to be fuzzed out? I don't understand.
It's a very random question, but it's related. I was recently told about somebody named Trixie Mattel. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes, actually.
The reason I bring him up is, in case anyone's wondering, this is ridiculous, but it's a drag queen, but also he's a country singer, and
Okay,
his
that part
music
I
is
didn't know.
it has nothing to do with comics, but his music is amazing, and he sings in his normal guy voice, but he also
Really?
yeah, it's fascinating, but he's got like country music. It's really sad and sappy and actually very moving. And at the
Wow.
same time, he's got this alter ego who's a drag queen, who's ridiculous, and he tells jokes and
Absolutely ridiculous. See, I've being female and occasionally liking makeup, I've been known to watch unnecessary like makeup guru videos.
yeah.
And Trixie Mattel has been on a few, like drag transformation with Trixie.
And you can
So that's
tell
the
like
first time I, got
okay.
introduced to that particular character, as it were. And and then I looked up saw some of the comedy stuff. I completely, not necessarily, I guess I'm kind of shocked.
It's really interesting. I
But
would
I'm
never
not.
have known about it by myself. But because he's got that persona of, the drag thing with the comedy, he's got a
Yeah.
series. That stuff's actually pretty funny. But then to hear his country music, the reason I bring it up is because of the how surprising it is, how good it is. I think it's fascinating to see sort of what am I trying to say? Even though maybe he didn't win all these competitions, let's say, as his other character, his music is still excellent. And whatever audience he has might listen to this music and say, wow, this is really, it impacts me. So the reason I bring it up is that even though maybe, let's say, you didn't get on American Idol, let's say, you still are really, you have this immense talent that when you share it with people, it just gives them pleasure. And really, if nothing else, that's what art, I think, should be. It's
Yes.
even if it's you and one other person, you're playing your music for one other person or drawing for one other person. If you're touching them and it's a meaningful interaction, I think that's more valuable than having a reach of 1,000 people that just kind of like you.
That is right within the mentality that I'm trying to foster within myself and other people. That's actually part of my new positive gimmick, the whole hashtag art life thing. That ties into my mentality that just being able to live your life the way you want to and express yourself whatever way that is, whether it be writing, talking, laughing, like telling jokes, whatever it is that you do to get you through the day, that's art to me. Like everybody's life is their own individual masterpiece. So when I use the hashtag art life, I'm not just talking about people who draw pretty pictures for a living. I'm talking about everybody on the planet who just gets through the day doing the best that they can. Like that's art life.
Yeah, I support that also. I think the only obstacle in my life that, I mean, it's a meaningful obstacle is just being able to earn a living. But I love the idea of, I guess you could say, like a holistic life. Like my hobby is the thing that I do pretty much all the time. It's all I think about. I write these stories, they seem to generate themselves. It's all I can do to just write them down and then I draw them.
See, that's my ideal dream. Like that's what I'm hoping to circle back around to. Now that I'm more comfortable with myself and I'm actually not afraid to write my own story. My dog is growling at me a little bit, but she'll be good. She'll be fine. I'm hoping to get to the point where at some point I'm just living off of the stories that come out of my head and my ability to translate them onto paper, or to have the money to maybe hire other artists who I think's style more suits what's in my head, because sometimes I don't really feel like my hands are capable of putting what I'm seeing in my head into the best representation. And there's artists online that I would love to be like, hey, can I throw money at you for a little while? I just don't have the money to do it. And I'd love to get to a point where my own art is funding my ability to throw money at other artists, because that would make me happy all the way around, because it would help me out and it would, I'm sure, help them out. Everybody loves making money, especially doing something fun. And if I'm going to hire an artist, it's not going to be to tell them what to do exactly. It's going to be like, here's my idea and you're the one I want to make it visual. Like that's where I'm at. Or if I'm like, I have a concept, because there's a couple of concepts I have that I think are solid. I just don't have the capacity to write them the way that I feel like they should be written. So I'd love to hire another artist, be like, hey, I came up with this idea that I want to draw, but I need you to write it. Here's some money.
Oh, I see.
But I don't, being somebody who has done the freelance thing and has tried to make a living with art of some kind or with a skill that I have, I never in a million years consider approaching somebody and being like, hey, can you do this thing for free? I've occasionally like done art trade situations. That's really hard to come across a perfect scenario where like you need something done that's the exact equivalent of something somebody else needs done and you guys can swap. Like the
Yeah, it's
barter
really hard.
system's hard in the art world. It doesn't work all the time.
No, I think, well, you've got the people who are trying to break out. Maybe a younger person fresh out of school is just looking for padding for their portfolio. That sort of person might be in the best position. The professional is probably too expensive, and then I call them trust fund babies. Not in a bad way, but like they have so much money that they just want to do whatever they want to do.
And that's the dream. Like, I can't even be mad at people who get there. Like, I can be a
No,
little bitter about it, but I'm not going to hold it against them. I'm only bitter because I haven't gotten there yet.
yeah,
And I have to
I'm
keep telling
jealous.
myself, I'm like only 30. I have plenty of time.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a certain poetry to just sort of seeing what cards you get dealt and doing the best you can. Even if it's just on the side, finding time to draw and share some illustrations or a full blown comic. Like if I was to draw a comic, my early comics, the strip from back in the day, it's just something I would find time to do, scrape together some time. And I wouldn't even try to draw very well. But it's just, oh, I have this really funny idea for a strip, and I just want to share it with people, even if it was stick figures.
See, that's the thing. I can't get myself to stay to, I try really hard to make simplified styles. I've wanted to do like a basic web comic for so long. I have so much of it like jotted down. But every time I go to like draw it, I end up making these like hyper detailed stylized things that I'm like, how am I supposed to draw this in like 12 panels quickly? What am I doing to myself?
Does it
And
take
I
a
end
lot
up
of
stuck
time?
in a limbo because I can't force myself to make just quick, cute, simple, shape-based designs. My dumbass sits there and overshades and details crap for 20 minutes and is like, why? Why did I do this?
If is it a speed issue though? Because 20 minutes per panel is pretty generous.
Well,
That's
that's just me designing the details of the freaking character. That's like simple, just the face.
okay.
That's me just designing the face because I usually start with, oh, let me come up with a fun character design, a face that I can draw quickly over and over again. And I'm sitting there, and 20 minutes later, I've got like super detailed nostrils and the creases in the lips and individual eyelashes, and I'm like, why? Why did I do this? This is not what I wanted. This is not what I sat down and thought I would do. And it's situations like that where I want like a very particular type of style that either I can't like I can maybe one off replicate it if I really try and just focus on the one thing, but it's not something I'd be able to easily replicate frequently enough to do anything sequential with. And that's where I get stuck wanting to hire other artists. And at some point, I'm gonna get there. My Troll Smasher comic that I'm still super developing early, like writing down concept and plot for, that one is gonna be the My Baby project because it's one that's based off of like old Dungeons and Dragons scenarios that I tried to dungeon master right when I was a kid.
Mhm.
It's like instead of playing through it as a tabletop game, I'm going to make my character the main character of this story. Is basically how that's going down.
I see.
Yeah, and it's fun because I hadn't really thought about what she would look like when I first started doing that back in the day. And I was such a lonely little nerd. I would dungeon master and play my own games. Like I would play Dungeons and Dragons by myself on paper. That's where
Well,
I was at.
I
And I
know
was
people.
okay with it. I was totally okay with it. I wasn't even mad because usually I'd get like frustrated because I don't always work well with others.
Mhm.
When I do get into social situations, like even people I like, I find myself getting, I don't know, I get irritated. Not in a mean way. And I think it's just if I'm in a conversational setting for too long with too many people, I just get cranky.
I see.
But I couldn't really not get, and I have a competitive issue, which is why my brief stint competitive gaming didn't last very long because it got kind of unhealthy.
Mhm.
I'm a very unusual creature. Like I don't like people in large groups. I freak out. But I'm really competitive. And I get freaked out if I'm alone for too long. Like I have like, have you ever gotten in those weird mental things where you're like, am I real if you're by yourself for too long, or is that just me?
Well, no, everybody's different, of
Do
course.
I even exist if I don't leave this room?
Well, some people do get the cabin fever kind of thing.
I mean, I go both ways. Like, I go both ways. Dutch. I go back and forth on that, actually. So sometimes I will want to be, and I'm not claustrophobic at all. When I was a kid, I'd freak out and I'd go hide in the pantry, like for safety. I thought it was safe to do that. So I don't really mind being in tight spaces, but I guess maybe I don't know, I get freaked out. Like if I'm left alone for too long, if something happens, will anybody notice kind of a thing? Like my anxious brain just starts creating these like horrible Final Destination scenarios where if nobody checks on me for 20 minutes, I'm going to die.
So maybe
like that kind of weirdness.
The feeling of being alone around other people.
Yeah. If other people are around, I'm actually okay. Because I'm like, if something crushes my skull, someone will notice.
I see. Well,
but I don't want to talk to any of them. I just want to sit in the corner and stare at them and know that they're there.
Well, honestly, a lot of people can go their whole lives and never really sort of quantify. What's the word? Elaborate, kind of sketch out, oh, that's my ideal place. That's where I thrive. A lot of people sort of never get this feeling of I'm in my element. But if that is, in fact, where you think that you're at your strongest, I think that's a good thing.
I mean, it is. And I think the equivalent of that would be the internet when you think about it, because I can selectively choose who I engage with on the internet. Like nobody can force me to interact with them. They can try. But that's the thing about the internet. You always have the conscious choice to not engage with this person or this individual or this account. Like you can completely ignore it and you can put the extra effort into making it impossible for them to continue to try. And I think that's my equivalent of sitting in a corner and being able to observe people and only talk to the people that I want to talk to if they walk up to me, kind of a thing.
I see.
And so I guess that's why I've always been comfortable on the internet to a point where I'm not as stressed out or as self-conscious on the internet.
It's true. You can keep people at arm's length and you can always disengage if they get too rowdy.
Yeah. And I'm not super sensitive when it comes to like insults or trolls or stuff like that. Like I've had some people say some really mean stuff to my face. So the internet isn't one of those places where I'm going to go hide in a corner and cry because somebody said I didn't look pretty. For one, I'm not on the internet to look pretty. If you think I'm pretty, that's great. That's a happy accident. But 9 times out of 10, if I'm wearing makeup, it's because I got bored and it was there. And my hair color is one of those things where I do it for me. And that's actually something funny. My alter ego that I created when I was a kid and I first started trying to want to do webcomics was literally a female cat girl with pink hair. And so I've gone my entire life wanting pink hair, but always either having issues with the dyeing process and almost going bald, or just being told by the stylist, oh, your hair just won't be that color. That color's not doable. So, I mean, obviously I proved everybody wrong, including hair dye companies who said, your hair will not do this. I'm like, yeah, watch it do it.
I guess there's a sort of, this also goes in the direction of gal comics readers, let's say. I was curious to ask about that. And I realize we've done an hour, so I don't want to keep you on for too much longer. But
yay, I talk a lot for no reason.
No. Hour is good. I don't want to take up too much time, but we can go more. I just don't want to, again, the introvert thing. I feel like I'm stealing time from your life.
No worries, and we can always schedule another round. I'm okay with this. This was super chill.
Well, on the subject of, well, let's say I live with a woman, of course, my wife, and there's the whole self-image, makeup, how one expresses themselves. For me as a guy, let's say, it doesn't bother me. Like my haircut is just my hair so that I don't have to ever think about my hair. And I don't really ever groom myself outside of, I barely shave sometimes. But there is a very important connection between who a lady is, I suspect.
I think I got lucky in that I have this ability to look like I gave a shit about what I looked like before I took a picture. And 9 times out of 10, I don't. I don't often wear makeup. When I do, it's mascara, and that's just because I feel like I can't see my eyeballs, right? Like with the glare through my glasses. If I'm taking a picture, I'm like, I don't like how my eyeballs look. I'll put mascara on. Like it was obviously different when I was younger. I was more self-conscious, and I would actually make sure I looked a certain way because I cared if other people looked at me. But I'm in a good situation now where I'm in a healthy relationship with somebody who kind of gets irritated if I take too long to put makeup on, even if I'm bored and doing it for funsies.
Mhm.
So I don't really have a desire I'm not peacocking to find a mate. So I don't really feel compelled to do that. So when I look in the mirror, I'm looking to see if I like my own reflection.
Yeah, there's really a lot of different factors to it.
And I don't like when you mentioned a haircut, I cut my own hair and I go entirely off of how it looks in the reflection part that I can see. So there's been times where the back of my hair looks like an absolute hot mess and I don't give a shit because I don't have to look at it. Like that's where I'm a terrible female. I just happen to have a symmetrical face and have lost enough weight in my adulthood to not have something that somebody can immediately point out and make fun of on the internet. They try, and it's funny because they pick random stuff like my eyebrows, and I'll even give them better ammunition. Like somebody was trying to say, "Oh, your eyebrows, what's up with that?" I'm like, "My eyebrows are fine, but my forehead is huge in this photo. How did you not notice that?" Like, I get irritated when trolls try to insult stuff that doesn't make sense. I'm like, all of that low-hanging fruit, and you're making fun of my eyebrows. Wow, you're bad at this. I'm so desensitized to that. Like, I don't care what other people think about my aesthetic choices at all anymore. It helps that they like them. Like, it's always fun when somebody's like, "You look great." I'm like, "Thanks. That's good to know." It makes me feel good when I get a compliment, but it doesn't make me feel like shit when I get an insult. It's kind of weird.
Well, it's kind
good.
of strength in a way, isn't it?
It's great. I mean, there's sometimes when people get real hateful and I'm like, ouch, like, yikes. I'm upset that you were mad enough to say all of that, but it wasn't what they said that hurt my feelings, kind of a thing.
It was the intent.
Of course, yeah, it depends on the person per se. If it's like somebody that I thought was cool or whatever, and they just completely go ham on the insults, I'm like, yikes, okay. So that's awkward, but it's not like I'm not gonna go cry myself to sleep and not eat and wear a bunch of makeup the next day, kind of a thing. Like it's not gonna affect my life on a daily basis.
Yeah, I've noticed that with a couple of interactions that I've had on Twitter, let's say, where it's the things that they're saying don't matter to me, but it's the fact that they're trying to be rude intentionally to poke me. It's like, why are you even bothering?
Yeah, they're trying to insult you, and they're saying things that would normally, and I'm sure that if it was somebody else, it would have really upset them. I've had people try to do that a lot, and it's really awkward to be sitting there, and it's like I'll tell them if I'm laughing at them, and that usually makes them very upset, and they'll try harder. But at some point, you just give up and mute and move on, because it's like they're just really upset.
Yeah.
There are times when I find it really hilarious, because the things that will set them off on that tirade is like, yikes, all I did was say okay. Like, the weirdest stuff. And it's like I go through the thought process of, what kind of a life do you have that you have this much free time to be this mad on the internet over stupid stuff? Like, this isn't even serious business.
That does seem to be the pattern, yeah. But if we're on the internet and we're trying to put out some work, let's say, I think that's the thing to keep focused on. Whatever somebody's trying to do to poke you, that's the product that they're trying to create. But if someone's an illustrator or an artist or has sung a song that they want to share, that's why I'm on Twitter. I want to share the stuff that I make. I don't actually...
That's what I thought people would be making fun of when they came for me, because they didn't like my opinion on something, which is usually inane and I present it in a comedic fashion. Like, I'm very rarely rude about my opinions, and I disagree with people I like all the time. And it's fine. Like, I'll politely say, if they're like, I don't like this thing, I'm like, aw, I do. That's cool. Whatever. We're still friends. Like, la la la. Fine. Like, no big deal. They stated their opinion. I'm stating mine. We're not going to yell at each other about it, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But at some point, somebody will come in from left field, see your opinion or your agreement with so-and-so or your disagreement, and they'll call you X bad thing for it. And that's really random and out of left field. I'm usually expecting them to pick on my art. Like, that's what I try to post more often. So when they'll dig through and just try to make fun of, like, they go for my face, I guess, because I'm female, and they assume that's what's going to hurt my feelings if they call me ugly or fat. And I'm like, that's not what I'm here for, so I don't really care what your opinion on that is. And one person tried to comment on my art, and it was the funniest thing I've ever heard anybody try to say. They said, I don't understand how to use color, and that I make all of my shadows gray, which I don't know if you've looked at my Twitter. I am not afraid of color at all. Like, that's not even, like, I was trying really hard to figure out what the hell they had seen, what they saw that they thought was my art that made them think that I was afraid of color and made all of my shadows gray. Like, the one time somebody comes for the thing that might actually affect me at any level, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, you clearly didn't even look at my artwork. You just saw artist in my profile.
Jeez.
I
Yeah,
don't
muting is the only tool, I guess.
I mean, the hard block is always effective. I've actually kind of curated my Twitter feed, and because I don't have such a high following and I don't get as much interaction, and I know sometimes it looks like I get a lot, but I really don't get a lot of interaction. Most of the time it's somebody tagging me in a thread and I'll respond once, and then every time somebody else responds to that thread, I get a notification. So that's when I post the tweets of me like, I just refreshed this and I've got 150 notifications. It's other people talking around me. It's not really people talking to me at all.
I see.
So I have an easier I can mute the conversation and it's fine. But I do have it set, I think. I need to check it. I may have turned it off, but I had it set to where I only get notifications like on my phone or anything like that when somebody who's following me interacts or I'm following them. If I'm not following you and you're not following me, I'm not going to get notified when you comment on my stuff. But one of those two things has to happen. And in my mind, that's perfectly fine because I'm not going to be ignoring a fan that way. If they're a fan, they're following me. And I'm going to get notified when they comment or when they say something. If they have a critique or say, hey, this is terrible. And I'll be like, that's great. I didn't do it for you. But I will avoid offending you in the future. Like, I don't typically, half the time I'm posting doodles. I don't post a lot of finished work right now because I'm in the middle of a lot of projects. So it's not really something that, I mean, what are you going to do? Say you don't like the ballpoint pen lips I posted? That's terrible. I'm not sure what to do about that.
Well, I don't know
But I'm not
who
gonna
would take the time.
They're there, and it's weird when I notice through, because I'll go through and click a thing and look at the comments, because I know that there's a chance somebody who isn't following me commented because somebody else they were following commented or liked a thing.
Yeah.
So I'll look through just to see if anybody who isn't following me is worth me giving a follow to, because if I follow them, I will get notified. So I do that a lot, and it's actually gotten to the point where I've gotten some pretty snarky comebacks and remarks on some stuff that I've said, but I don't see it until 3 days later, and at that point, I'm not going to reply because that makes me look stupid. I'm not going to re-engage somebody after 3 days. At this point, it looks like I've ignored them pretty successfully, even though I just didn't see it.
It's amazing how effective ignoring somebody is.
It is, and it's funny when you don't mean to ignore them, but when by the time you circle back around to it, you're like, oh, that was shitty of you anyway. I'm glad I didn't see this until a week later.
Well, I guess one of the rules of the internet is just engaging. The longer you engage in a fight, it just makes everybody look stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on the snarky, sarcastic social commentary on the situation, and most of the time I'm commenting on how ridiculous the argument is, not what they're arguing about.
Yeah,
that's my typical commentary: is this whole argument is stupid, or how do you guys have this much free time? Like, I'm not making a comment whether who I'm agreeing or disagreeing with. I'm typically saying everybody in this thread is ridiculous. Have a great day. Like, back my art book, like. That kind of a thing, which I've been trying to add that to the end of every tweet because I'm terrible at self-promotion. So the only thing I can think to do is every time I tweet, put the link to that. Like, every time. It's the only thing I can think to do right now.
Well, really, if we're curating our own experience online and we want to present ourselves as creators, let's say, our work is what we want to put forward.
Okay, wholesome isn't the right word. I want to be the positive person who's also kind of an annoying bitch. Like, I want to find that balance is what I'm looking for. I don't want to ever piss somebody off so bad that they feel the need to destroy my career. But I don't mind irritating people every now and then. I think it's kind of fun. It keeps it from getting boring. And so far, I haven't. Most of the time, the people I choose to try to irritate say it's endearing because they can tell I'm trying to be playful. I'm not actually trying to be mean. Like, and I try to selectively pick the people I know have a sense of humor. And make sure that whatever inside joke it is isn't going to be misconstrued as something freaking terrible by a casual onlooker, because Lord knows people can't stay out of conversations they're not involved in if they can see them. It's a human compulsion. I think that's like 90% of Twitter arguments is people seeing something somebody said to somebody else and getting offended on their behalf for no reason.
Yeah, a lot of dogpiling, I suppose.
It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
You offended my friend. Now I will fight you.
Like, that's that's not necessary because you don't know if they meant to offend you. Like, there's so many things, especially on the internet. It is literally impossible to know every single thing about a situation well enough to get yourself involved if you weren't already involved. Like, why? Why risk backing? Like, why even risk supporting the wrong person in a dispute? Why don't you just say, I'm not involved with this. I hope you both have a great day. Like,
That's wise. Yeah.
like, that's how I try to conduct myself. And so far, I haven't really had a lot of people try to, misconstrue that. And I've been super grateful because I know that's a pretty big deal, is if you don't publicly denounce somebody for doing a thing that you're may or may not, like, I don't want somebody to tell me why I don't need to like somebody, or why I need to tell everybody I don't like somebody. If I don't like somebody, I'm going to tell them personally, and then I'm going to disassociate with them. I'm not going to make a big public spectacle about it because that's just ridiculous.
No. It's honestly a lot of, well, it's a cultural problem. Everyone's trying to get in each other's business.
It's unnecessary. I don't understand at what point humanity made that social shift. Because there was a time when I was younger, sticks and stones broke our bones, but words could never hurt us was a thing, and that's completely out the window. Like, that concept seems like something foreign I read in fiction now when I look at the way people react to things.
You looked at me the wrong way, therefore it's violence.
Yeah, or I assumed that I assume that you have this opinion for X reason, and I refuse to ask you why you have that opinion, or let you confirm or deny it. It's this opinion. You have this innate opinion about this super, innate thing that shouldn't really mean more than it does. But because you have this opinion, I am going to assume all of these things about you, and that's just terrible. And it's like the people who are complaining about words being weapons are the ones using them the worst, and that's just flabbergasting to me.
Well, it's easiest to hide stuff like that right in front of someone's face.
I'm just exhausted with people lately. Oh. And I don't have the energy to actually take the effort to really navigate things carefully. So at some point I'm going to say something stupid and the internet will cancel me and they will come for me and my life will be over. And I just have to be okay with that. In the back of my head, I just have to be prepared for that at all times because nobody is safe.
I don't know. I hope that's not true. It's probably not as serious as it sounds.
I mean, again, I would rather be prepared and it not happen than get in a state of mind where I'm like, oh, I am far too wholesome and far too charismatic and far too many people like me. I'm delightful. And then all of a sudden, nope, it's all over. You said something wrong, or we assumed all of these things about you based on X thing. And it's bound to happen. I'm sure there's already people out there who have one opinion or another about a belief that I may or may not have, specifically because I follow or am followed by X person. And I just think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life. That's how people think. That kind of mentality is commonplace now. And it doesn't just affect random social interactions. It literally makes it hard to just market a thing. Yeah. Whatever the thing is in whatever culture, because it's not just comic books, it's literally anywhere. Makeup gurus are coming for each other's necks on the internet now. Then they do makeup. That's what? Mm-hmm. There's nothing, no industry is above it, and no industry is without the chaotic drama fueling every fire known to anything. It's not just restricted to nerds and nerd culture. It's not just the gamer gates and the comics gates. It's literally every subculture on the planet is having this horrible problem with toxicity and negativity and drama and people trying to cancel each other or insult each other or dig up things from people's past and use them against each other in one way or another. And it just seems so exhausting. Why? Isn't it easier to just fucking chill out and try to be happy and maybe pet a kitten or...
I just call it neo-Puritans, what they're doing. They're just trying to clean the world and make it safe because they're so terrified of the sun. They don't want to go outside anymore because there's
if they just
every corner.
Well, that's the thing. If they stayed inside and left everybody else the hell alone, it wouldn't be a problem.
They have to
make your personal choice. Build your. I mean, it's it's infuriating that it's like they don't just want to build echo chambers. They want to drag everybody into that one with them. Like, you have to think this way. Come hear all this thoughts. And if you don't want to be part of my select group of this particular thing that thinks this way, then you're a bad person. It's like, no, I just have a slightly different opinion. And that's all it takes, is a slightly different opinion. So I'm trying to be like the most honest person on the world on the internet, but there's certain things that just it doesn't matter. Like, how I think or what I believe on certain topics should not have anything to do with whether or not you think my art is pretty or you like the story I came up with. Because I'm not selling you my political opinion. I'm not selling my, like, any personal details about myself. I just happen to know that people have an easier time buying things from somebody who's a real person. So that's my point. When I put my face and I do things that are a little vulnerable online, that's me trying to show, hey, I'm an actual person. And I'm not pretending to be this person. Like, I don't put a wig on to have this hair, and I don't play a character online to sell people stuff. Like, this is just me. And yeah, it's a brand at this point, because I don't think I'm comfortable having my hair a normal color anymore. I just don't think it would fit my vibe. And that's kind of me personally. Like, it almost becomes a brand. If I were to suddenly make a 180 flip and try to be super pristine and never swear or never post a boob picture or retweet a boob gif or like anime titties, like, it would be weird. It would freak people out, and I'd probably lose a lot of followers because they'd be able to tell that I'm suddenly trying to fake something. Like, that would be the thing that would get me called out. If I suddenly tried to be like, oh, I'm super sweet and super wholesome all the time, people would call me on that bullshit, because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for me.
It's like a good long-term strategy. There's people who are looking for the short term, but they're not going to last.
I tried all of the short-term stuff. Like, that was my struggle. That's what screwed me over when I was trying to make money. I was trying everything and anything to get the short-term money, and yeah, it would work for that day or that week, but it wasn't sustainable, and it's not what paid for my apartment at all.
Makes sense. Well, I think whatever you're angling at seems like a very good direction, and maybe those people, the attention getters, are going to have short-term popularity, let's say, but in a few years after this culture war has died down, they're going to end up looking very foolish.
I mean, some of them might. I think there's a few who have conducted themselves better than people are giving them credit for.
I see.
Because they're not, I mean, yeah, they're obviously capitalizing on the drama and the negativity, but they're not causing as much of it as a lot of people. Like, I've noticed people who aren't causing the drama, they're literally just commenting on it, in most cases in a funny way. Those people are being, like, demonized as horrible people who are creating the chaos. I'm like, no, they're kind of trying to lighten the mood. There's a difference between commenting on something and trying to be funny about it and, like, lighten the situation, than being the person who's actually starting the trouble. And I think that's something people have kind of lost sight on. It's like, sometimes people aren't being an asshole, they're just trying to be funny. And if you don't think they're funny, that's fine, but they're not trying to be mean. Like, that's something I'm constantly having to remind people. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound mean, I'm just being funny. And I'm not trying to be, I don't try to, like, put people down or belittle them, but sometimes I'll make a comment and I'll be funny and I'll be like, I'm sorry, that may have been mean, or that may have been rude. Most of the time it's not, but I try to be conscious of that, because I know people are much more sensitive now than they used to be. It's something that would be completely harmless even 2 years ago would suddenly shatter somebody's soul today, and that makes me sad.
I don't know. For that kind of person, I just say, grow thicker skin, or you're listening to the wrong person. I feel bad telling people, like, don't follow me, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm never going to tell anybody to not follow me. That's one of the things, because no. I don't put, but I mean, I'm sure that there are things that I have said that have made people go click. In fact, a couple of them have literally come for me about it. Like, I'll make a comment and they'll assume a whole bunch of stuff, say a bunch of mean things, unfollow me, or like soft block me. That thing where if you're mutuals, they block and unblock you so that you're not following them anymore either. Yeah. I've had a couple of people who I was really cool with for a long time do that, because it's always when I actually state an opinion, and they always think it has to do with a larger topic. Like I made a comment about something stupid, and it came from my own personal opinion based on my own views. Like when I was growing up, I was always bullied and treated like shit by other women. And it was my guy friends that would step in and be like, whoa, that's a little harsh, kind of a thing. So I don't have that man bad kind of mentality as a female. I don't feel like they've coddled me or anything, but I feel like the only reason I ever had a backbone or got a chance to defend myself at any point in time was because the men and boys in my life weren't assholes. And I know that's me getting lucky, but that was just me personally being like, no, women can be mean, or me making a comment about like women are entirely capable of being bullies and assholes. And this sent this person into a complete tirade about how women get victimized and assaulted on the street every minute. And I'm like, okay, well, you clearly live somewhere differently than I do. I'm not saying that this is a global situation. I'm commenting on my life personally. And people don't seem to be able to rectify that in their brains, that people aren't going to be able to share your worldview because they're not living your life. And that's what's supposed to make life a beautiful thing, is that everybody has their own perspective and something different to bring to the table. And there was a brief period in my life where I felt like everybody was celebrating that, and that was a good thing. And suddenly it's a bad thing now. Like if you don't believe the thing that's the socially acceptable thing to believe, or the socially acceptable way to think or like, then people are going to start making up all kinds of crazy shit about you, and it makes life difficult. And it's messed up that it can come down to something to the point where it, like, people like you and me question being able to market or actually sell comic books, because we don't want to be the controversial figures, but it's impossible not to be brought into it if you're in any way involved in a culture that's having that issue.
I suppose collectivism is part of what you were describing when they say
yes.
Yeah, they can't separate or can't understand the difference between an individual and that category that individual belongs to. So, for example, I have one lady character in one of my comics who's very neurotic, and she's one of the troublemakers, let's say, in a relationship, and it's supposed to be for comedic effect. And some of my readers misunderstood that I was trying to say she represents all women. And I said, at what point, because I have other women characters, can you not see that this person, this one character, is representing herself and herself alone? And they tried to extrapolate, oh, George hates all women. So it seems that they're being trained. Unfortunately, maybe it's a school thing. There's just a whole generation of people who can't understand the difference between one person and everyone in that category. It's just a very stupid way to think.
I've been trying to figure it out myself, because that seems to be where the biggest, if that issue would get resolved and people just cut that the fuck out, then it would help a lot of issues. It would calm situations down a lot, because then you wouldn't have people feeling the need to gatekeep who you could and couldn't talk to, because you talking to this person doesn't automatically mean you believe and think everything they do.
And they don't have the right to tell you who you can and can't talk to. As, like, I'll say, as a man, I don't give you permission to talk to, this other man, because I don't like the way that you're talking to men in general. As stupid as that would sound. It's as a member of this community, I don't give you permission to speak to this other member in my community, which I am an unelected representative of.
And they'll try to cite like X amount of reasons that they think are perfectly valid. And those reasons usually have nothing to do with you personally, or you can't even confirm or deny that they ever happened. And it would take a lot of time and energy to figure that out. And in the meantime, it's not that serious.
No.
Like, it isn't that serious. People expect, and I know it's kind of bold to say something like this, but if it doesn't personally affect me, and it doesn't look like something that's going to affect you for the rest of your life in a horrible, detrimental way, I don't see why I'm supposed to give a shit. Like, and that's not to even be mean. Like, people get really upset over really stupid stuff, in my opinion, and they get mad when you're not upset on their behalf as well. Like, you should be upset at so-and-so because I'm upset at so-and-so. And people get really upset with you if you say, well, I kind of, in my opinion, feel like you're overreacting.
I see.
And that's where it becomes really problematic, because, I mean, obviously, if somebody was saying, hey, this person killed my dog, like, I saw them do it, here's the police report, they just got out of jail, like then I'd be like, all right, that's fucked. Like I can't tolerate that. Like that would be me. That's the kind of thing where I'd be like, okay, maybe I don't want to talk to this person anymore. They're psychotic. They murdered something.
Yeah.
Like that kind of a thing. Obviously, I would take seriously. But they said X mean thing, or they did this thing that I construed this way. If I see any, and it's kind of like the court of my brain, if there's any reasonable doubt that this person did this thing non-maliciously and you're just taking it that way, then I'm not going to assume that they're an evil, vile person. They just hurt your feelings. It happens. Good people hurt people's feelings all the time. They don't mean to do it. It does not mean that they're the devil.
I see. Yeah.
I refuse to be the person who just, I mean, I don't like people in general, but I don't assume everybody on the planet is got some horrible negative vendetta all the time. I believe people make mistakes, and I believe people get caught up in stupid things, like the whole outrage addiction culture where everybody's pissed off and mad about everything. Like, I don't blame everybody for being caught up in it, because human beings are social creatures, and it's the monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. We're technically primates, so it makes sense for them to want to mimic what they see as the majority. The problem is it's just the people that are the loudest that are assumed to be the right way to think. And chances are they're not always, in most cases, they're not the actual majority. They're just the people talking the loudest.
That is a social phenomenon I've actually been reading about. There's this book called Quiet by Susan Cain that I've been reading. She mentions a phenomenon where anyone who is outspoken enough in a group of people will say, like, for instance, oh, let's get on a bus and go to this town to hang out. And then everybody gets on the bus because, oh, yeah, let's go. And then they get there and there's nothing to do. And they say, why did we get on the bus? This sucks. And they don't realize that they were just following the most outspoken person. And one of the theses of the book is just because a person's charismatic does not mean they have the best ideas. They just happen to be the loudest. And what the book is trying to say is listen to the people who stop and think. The people who are not so outgoing. And gregarious is one of the words they use.
And I think that might be, in the flip side, I think that's where that kind of comes down to what you were saying, the long term. People like, say, you and me, who didn't just immediately come out the gate screaming, look at me, I'm awesome, might not have the established fan bases that some other people do. But the fans that we do get aren't going to be so polarized that we could lose them in a heartbeat, if that makes sense.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Yeah, because that was my kind of goal, because it's not, kind of lost my thought a little bit there, but it's kind of like they're the vocal minority. You know, it's like the small group of people that are really loud about things, or the outspoken person that everybody went with because they were loud. Well, once they get there and realize this person doesn't have as much substance, or maybe I don't agree with everything they said, now that I've stopped and actually paid attention to what they're saying, not just the volume in which they're saying it, like maybe I don't agree with all this, or maybe they're not as talented as I thought they were to begin with, and maybe they, don't follow them as heavily, or don't continue to support them the way that they did out the gate. But I'd like to think that the people who actually end up being like my fans or my supporters, or in your case your fans or your supporters, the people that we didn't catch their attention by jumping up and down going, look at me. They happened upon us one way or the other, is how I like to look at it. Like, I happened upon your cartoons and your doodles and stuff, and then wound up seeing you comment on stuff that were people that I knew saying things. And I'm like, oh, hey, here's an excuse for me to put the oh, hi. Like, that's what I look for. If I want to engage with somebody, it kind of has to be a friend of a friend scenario. I have to see them engage with somebody else I know, so I can use that as an excuse. Like, oh, you came up on my feed for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like
a good way.
The sick way, because then I don't feel awkward. Like, it doesn't feel like, hey, I hunted you down, even when, like, sometimes it's unrelated. Like, I will find, like, if I like an artist that I saw on DeviantArt, say, and I go find them on Twitter, I won't say anything to them unless I see them talking to another artist I know. Like, then I know that it's not weird, because I'm like, okay, I know that person's cool, they're talking to them, okay, this shouldn't be awkward. It's usually awkward anyway, but that's like my networking tactic. Like, I don't even remember who it was, but I saw you comment and ask a question in a thread that people I knew were in, and I was like, cool, I can answer this question because I know these people and it's not weird.
Well, that works out for everybody, I suppose. Is I never keep track of how I got in touch with X, Y, or Z, but for me, it feels like organic networking. I don't like the idea of reaching out to people just for the sake of getting more followers or whatever it is, getting social points. But I like the idea of artists and creators and audience, people who appreciate this kind of work, all getting to know each other in a healthy way, in a non contrived way.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother my conscience.
And I
So,
think, especially in a community, when it comes to something like art, it's a lot easier to push past the competitiveness that people try to sometimes. Like, it's one thing to be playfully competitive in the, especially when it comes to like people who work on sequential stuff. Like, say, if you had a friend or whatever that was working on a web comic or a comic strip similar to yours, but different content, obviously different subject matter, you wouldn't necessarily be competitive in comparing the styles or the quality, but you might start competing with how fast you guys can put out material. Like, friendly competition I could see being something more common or more acceptable. But when it comes to art, because no two people, if you're getting creative or you're actually using more than just photorealistic stuff, you're not going to have two people create the same thing ever. Even if they're drawing, if you give 5 people the exact same drawing prompt and you give them the exact same tools, medium, everything to work with, they're still going to come up with 5 completely different pieces. That's for true. One reason or another. So it makes no sense to me for artists to be competitive, because especially if it's, I mean, maybe if it's like corporate design, but those are designers, those aren't artists. In my, even when I was doing it, I was like, this isn't art, this is just designing crap, which is a handy skill, especially now as I'm looking at, turning things into like formatting my art book. If I had absolutely no idea how to do any sort of graphic design and had never created a flyer for a company in my life, I would be stumbling around just panicked watching YouTube tutorials right now. I would have absolutely no idea what I was doing. But because I had that little bit of knowledge that I felt at the time, honestly, when I quit doing it, I was like, I just wasted this many years doing nothing beneficial. Like, I'm not going to use these skills that I forced myself to have just because I thought it would make me money. And now I'm circling back around to, well, hey, there you go. These are useful. Like for my website and stuff, like those webmastering and things, those are now things that I can use for my own work and apply to myself. And instead of having to struggle or hire somebody else in every aspect, I can kind of keep my overhead low by making myself do all the work. And it's hard, especially if it is a passion project that you're forcing yourself to work on, because it takes a little bit of the fun out of it. But I think it's kind of healthy for at least once in a while, forcing yourself to finish a project that's just for you, but also maybe try to market it. Not everything that you try to sell has to be made for specifically to be sold, in my opinion.
Well, selling, and this is winding around to the Indiegogo, which is one I wanted to close on, actually. But part of the way that you can support an artist, let's say, or a creator, just to thank them, is to, I mean, money is just the one more way to just say, oh, please make more of this, or this is worth your time. You've given me pleasure, so here, have this, and please make more so I can have more pleasure.
Absolutely. That is
my life.
Honestly, my long-term, that's my end of the day, all it takes for me to feel like I'm successful at what I do. Because I have a day job, and for the most part, that pays all the bills. The art is something that would be, great if it took off, but I'm not trying to, at this moment, try to make as much money as possible. I'm trying to build something and make people happy, bring them enjoyment. Not necessarily happy all the time, because there's sometimes I draw creepy stuff. Sure. And if somebody says, holy crap, this is going to give me nightmares, I might feel a little bit bad, but I'll also be like, yes, like nailed it, kind of a thing. Like, if that's what I'm going for, if that's what I'm feeling or whatever. And I don't, like, some of my best work is stuff that I just did for fun. And it's some of the stuff that people like the most. And it's stuff that gets commented on the most, or that I'm the most proud of. And it wasn't something that I did because I had to, or because I was trying to draw a specific thing that I thought would sell to people. And those, I think, people as consumers or viewers, or people who just consume art as by viewing it online, can tell when something's created solely for the purpose of, you know, making money or being purchased or being marketable, and then something that was just created from, you know, boredom. Yeah, you know, something that's, you know, I created this because I felt like I had to, or I needed to accomplish this goal that I set for myself, and it's like I just wanted to do the thing. And then something that just sort of sprung out of boredom, or hey, I threw all these colors into the palette and saw what happened. Like those are the fun things that I think people more enjoy looking at. And yeah, it might not look as clean, or it might not have smooth edges or be perfectly symmetrical, but it's more fun to look at than this perfectly cold, statuesque, like flawlessly proportioned thing that, yes, is technically better or more accurate to everything, but it's not as much fun to look at as this thing that's lopsided and sloppy and kind of wavy lined. But look at these colors and look at this, you know, dynamic motion. Like that's so awesome.
There's a subconscious, I think most people just feel it. They don't actually know what it is they're feeling, but they can tell when a creator has had fun making a piece or singing a song or anything creative.
And I think that's important.
It is. If it's something that's been sort of forced out mechanically, maybe cloned, copied, people get bored. Like, for instance, I don't want to get into a whole Game of Thrones thing, but like, for instance, the later episodes of Game of Thrones, people are complaining that it just felt there was no love, there was no passion, or if in a romantic context, if someone just gives their spouse a peck on the cheek, there's no love in it. But I was just being, maybe I'm loopy because it's late, but there's a feeling in art of this sort of like, that kiss had no passion to it. You must kiss me like you mean it, you know. That's what you say to your spouse, for instance.
Yeah, like if you look at something and it doesn't make you feel anything, that's a fail on my part.
Yeah.
When it comes to my work, if the first thing if all you feel is that's badass, that's something, you felt something. Like that's a win. But even if your intent is to depict something that's cold or lifeless, then that should still be reflected. It is entirely possible to just exert no emotion from an image.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that happen not often, because in most cases you can pick something up, but that's just terrible. And that was what I kind of felt like with some of the art that the instruction schools were kind of getting me to do. Is it wasn't necessarily art, it was how to accurately reduce proportions in your head using rulers so that you can look at this thing and make it exactly like that on a piece of paper.
It had no soul.
And it eventually got into where you stylize things, but it spends so much time focusing on getting it to where you can do perfect carbon copies that it messed me up. Like, I'm not going to lie. It makes it to where I am having a very hard time breaking things down into basic shapes and staying that way. That's something that I'm still working on. It's really a pain in the ass when you can't do, like, I can't do a stick figure. I can't. It drives me crazy, and I will fiddle with it until it's the most hyper detailed stick figure you've ever seen in your life for no reason.
Huh.
It's like a neurotic tick I don't know how to fight. Like I've been working on it, and I will do. That's why there's so many, because my face is the face I'm most familiar with. That's when I try to practice a new style or try to work something new, I will just draw my own face.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got sketchbooks and sketchbooks of like random selfie doodles that are completely different styles, and you'll see on the same page, like I'll start super simple and then I'll try to draw it at a different angle, and at some point I end up just adding way too much detail, or way more detail than I wanted to. And by the time I'm done, I'm like, this looks kind of cool, and I'll snap a picture of it, post it online, and then I'll try again later. But I still have yet to really lock in that super simple, just expressive but not hyper detailed style that I can use for the things that I kind of want to do. At the moment, I'm just trying to work with what skill sets I do have. And
I suspect we'll never really ever be satisfied with.
I don't intend to ever be satisfied. I think that's the mark of like a really fun artist, somebody who's always experimenting and trying to like learn new things or do a new trick or make this look different or unique in some way. I think it gets boring if you don't do that every once in a while.
I've had that criticism I have to stop talking after this. I swear. I'm sorry. With manga that goes on for too long, and the art is really stale, like Dragon Ball, let's say. The artist just goes on forever, and he's drawing the same characters, same poses, same facial expressions, and it's boring for me to read, and I could tell it's boring for them to draw. Um, I would rather just have them end the series.
It's a hard balance to find like something it's easy to do, I mean, you've obviously figured it out.
No, not at all.
Well, you
Um,
give that you could have fooled me.
no, you know what it is. I compare it to like the lady with low self esteem, where it's maybe she's pretty, she's very pretty, but she looks in the mirror and she's like, oh, I can't stand the way I look. And every time, I'm sure a lot of artists feel the same way. They look at
Artists
their
are
own.
always their toughest critics. Like
Yeah.
even the artists who pretend to be full of themselves or pretend to have the ego that's part of their brand or whatever. At the end of the day, the only reason their art looks the way that it does is because they hyper scrutinize every single thing that they do. They are their own worst critics. Every artist is their own worst critic.
Yeah, I suspect so.
Like
But
nobody actually calls themselves an artist or even considers, accepts the title unless they have picked apart their own shit until they wanted to cry.
mhm.
It's like
Now,
we've all done.
that's really a double-edged sword. That can be a strength or it can cripple you. It really depends on how, if you can turn it into a positive thing. I'm going to scrutinize my work so that I keep improving, but I'm not going to look at my stuff and say it sucks. I'm never going to pick up a pencil again.
You have to find a happy medium. That's actually something I'm
Exactly.
working on, right? Like that's something I'm constantly working on. Is I almost feel like if something isn't so hyper detailed that it could almost maybe have been a photo that was edited, that it's a failure. And I started to break away from that mentality, and I don't let myself, if I draw something on a piece of paper, I try to erase as little as possible,
Mhm.
and I will finish it. Like go, even if the proportions are terrible and it's completely off, I will finish at least at least the sketch part. And then instead of erasing it and starting over, I will do another one on another piece of paper. That way I have that landmark of where I went wrong and what I wanted to tweak that I can look at. And instead of picking at that one until it's perfect, I just start over and look at what I did wrong, kind of
Mm.
a thing. Like learn from my own mistakes, but not be ashamed of them or not be pissed off about them anymore. Kind of embrace them like, yeah, this is screwy or yeah, this is messed up. But hey, and that's kind of one of the things I'm embracing with the art book is I'm going through my sketchbooks and finding things that I never posted because I thought X thing was wrong with it and being like, this isn't that bad, or I like this thing about this, or this is where I was going with this. And I'm putting stuff in there that me when I drew it would have probably cried if somebody saw it.
Well, that sounds like a very vibrant project. Now, of course, I've seen the Indiegogo. Is if anyone's listening and they're curious to see, of course, how can they follow you on Twitter? How can they find all this stuff?
On Twitter, I am at Lost Lenore, LOSTLEANORE. That's actually my handle on Twitter and Instagram, and a variation of it is the Facebook I never use.
Mhm.
So if you follow me on Facebook, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. The Indiegogo is actually I using a fancy URL because the ones that Indiegogo gives you are super long. So it's just indiegogo.lenore.art, and that'll take you to the campaign. Um, and it is a colorful project. I am owning the fact that, and it's kind of funny for somebody who is technically kind of introverted, and I'm not super. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm humble, but I'm not necessarily super cocky about anything. I'm not really confident all the time. But I started thinking about the fact that on the surface, an art book is one of the most self-indulgent, narcissistic things an artist can produce because it's literally just a collection of crap I have already done
Mhm.
that I like or have some sort of connection with that I'm putting into a book. And instead of trying to humble that down and try to downplay it and be modest about it, I am making it the gimmick for the book. I haven't finished the cover yet. I'm still working on it because I'm being super extra about it. I sketched it with Prismacolor colored pencils, and then I went over it with colored pencils, coloring it. And then I think I put watercolors over that. And then I've been putting some like Copics on top of that. And then I think I'm going to scan the whole thing and do some digital stuff.
Mhm.
So I'm like being super extra using every tool in my toolbox, at least somewhere on it, just so I could say I did it. And the image is literally me riding a unicorn majestically while holding a magical paintbrush. Like, I'm not being subtle about it. I'm just like, here is my face. Here's my face again. Here's my face riding a unicorn. And it's kind of me forcing myself to be the opposite of myself, but in a way that people who pay attention to me on social media or watch my YouTube videos, they can tell that I'm not, like, it's ironic. I'm not really that full of myself. It's a joke. That's what makes it funny. It's the only way I could really be comfortable doing something like this, that is to make it funny. That goes back to my, like, humor is my self-defense mechanism. Like, the only way I'm not going to feel super vulnerable putting this much of myself out there is to put even more of myself on there and make it the gimmick.
I see. Well, there is a method to the madness.
It is a method to the madness. I'm not actually that full of myself. I'm just I'm overcompensating with my anxiety by just making it ridiculous. Now you can't make fun of me for being full of myself, because obviously that's the joke.
I see. Yeah, that is sensible,
I'm
actually.
preempting it because I didn't want to deal with it. I'm like, no, I don't want you to think I'm full of myself. I'm going to make sure you think I'm full of myself. It's reverse. Well, it's like, what do they call it? Oh, what do they do? Reverse psychology. If I tell you I'm full of myself, you'll think I'm super humble and talented, right?
Well, there are going to be links in the description, so I do invite everybody to go and take a look for themselves.
Yes, please do. And fun fact, as of right now, I can pretty much guarantee that even if it takes me doing it in batches, even if the campaign doesn't get to the goal, everybody who backs it with a perk is going to get a product. You're not going to be left hanging in the wind. There's a chance for some delays, but there's zero risk that you're not getting anything. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm not measuring my success in whether or not I meet my goal. I'm measuring my success on how happy the people who back it are at the end of the whole thing when it's all said and done. So even if 2 people had backed it and that was it, I was going to do everything I could to get those 2 people everything they selected and make sure that they had the most amazing customer service experience they've ever had.
Well, that sounds like a labor of love.
That is entirely what's up. I refuse to disappoint myself on that aspect, because up until this point, I've been predominantly the consumer, especially when it comes to things like books or comics. I've done paintings or single one-off artworks. I haven't done a collective thing like this that I've done. This is like totally new things for me, and I figured instead of waiting another 3 years to do the comic book, I'd start with the art book and I'll use it as a learning experience. But whatever lesson I learn, I'm not going to learn it at the expense of my supporters. Like, that's not an option for me.
Wow. That is definitely, it sounds like, in the cheesy way, it is a thing that has been conceived with love and care and attention, and yes, I'm sure it's a very meaningful project. Again, I invite everybody who's listening now. We've pre-recorded this. I'm going to post it in a little bit. I will have the links in the description, so please do check that out, and follow her on Twitter, and let your friends know about it.
Do all the things, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like.
Likewise. And you have a channel on YouTube as well, right?
I do. It's Leanore Tube, because I'm not as creative as my side, as my art would lead you to believe. Wow. I just stick with what I know. Everything's Leanore something.
Well, it's easy to find you then. And of course, I will put also links to that as well. Yeah, is there anything else you want to just say to everybody before we pack it up for tonight?
I just want to thank you for having me on and letting me ramble incoherently into a microphone at you for a while.
Not at all. It has been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to creative people. I could do it for hours. And especially, of course, I mean, it's obvious. You definitely fit the bill. Artist, musician, witty commentator.
Just an all-around weird nerd that likes colors.
It's a lot of fun. So I will be keeping a close eye on you in the future, and I want to see what else you make, and I'll be looking at your art and listening to your music, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yay! Well, I can't wait to do something exciting. I don't know. I ran out of steam on that thought.
It's late and it's Friday, but I am glad that you came. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope everyone had a good time listening.
Yes, thank you. I hope everybody has a wonderful night, day, whatever, whenever they're watching this.
Yeah. All right. I never have any good way to end these. So I'll just say good night to everybody. And thanks again for listening.
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Take it easy. Bye.